Hi, I'm Eric Wilson. I'll be your teacher for English 266, British literature from 1800 to the present. I haven't taught this class in a long time for various reasons. I've missed teaching it. I love teaching this class, so I'm extremely excited to be teaching it again. I just want to give you a little sense of why I like teaching this class so much. And I hope that what I say here will intrigue you more about the course if you're not already intrigued. So, this is a class on literary history. Our goal is to understand the development of British literature roughly over the last 200 years. So, in that regard, we'll be telling a story, trying to find various stories, various narratives that run through that literary history and show us the development of literary ideas over that period of time. So we'll be going for a wide historical sweep, and we'll keep that in mind. What's the difference between Romanticism and the Victorian Age, for instance? What's the difference between the Victorian Age and modernism? How does postmodernism relate to modernism? So on and so forth. These are big narratives, big ideas. But also, we'll be looking very closely at particular texts. We will cultivate close reading. We'll try to understand the nuances and subtleties, paradoxes, the complexities of what I think are really powerful literary texts that will not only enhance your understanding of literary language, but will help you to live a better life. Your imagination will be expanded, enriched, and hopefully you will become a more generous person. So, what's the value of a class in literary history that is a kind of dialogue between the sweep of history and the particular texts that create that history? Well, I think first and foremost, the value of literary history is should be obvious that you learn contexts, historical contexts that help you understand literary texts on maybe a deeper level than you would understand them without the historical context. So, say you read Miss Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which we'll be reading. The main character, Clarissa Dalloway, is a woman of the early part of the 20th century, but Woolf, in thinking about Clarissa Dalloway, is positioning her in relation to other models of femininity from the Victorian age. So, an understanding of Victorian ideas of gender will help us understand a character in a 20th century novel, hopefully on a deeper, richer level. Um, Another, I think, value of literary history is that you will learn to make connections among literary texts from different period, maybe even literary texts that seem on the surface to be quite dissimilar. Uh, this is really what it feels like, I think, to be educated on a college level, is to be able to, say, read Thomas Hardy's poem, The Darkling Thrush, which is a grim poem about how a thrush's song signals in a new year, a new century that is going to be dark and hopeless. And you think, well, oh, wait a minute. I know all kinds of bird poems because I've studied the Romantic period. I know about Keats's famous poem To a Nightingale, for instance. I know that Shelley wrote a poem to a skylark. I know that Coleridge wrote a poem to a nightingale. And suddenly you can place the poem from the turn of the 20th century in an interesting conversation with poems from an earlier period, just because you're aware of bird imagery in different literary texts. So your mind becomes very analogical, I think, in reading. You can make connections that you couldn't make before. And I think a third value of literary history is it shows us that our particular moment in history is not probably as value and interesting as we think it is. I think it's useful to understand that earlier periods were just as complicated and fertile and vital as our current period. So we can have a more open mind in thinking about the world. We won't tend to be overly narrow. We won't tend to see the world only through the eyes of our current moment, but we'll also try to see the world through the eyes of, say, a writer in 1820. And that, again, that can only expand our minds and our imaginations. So, to conclude, I'll say that literary history is really, in some ways, a primary activity of a liberal arts education. To me, a liberal arts education is precisely what allows us to make these kinds of connections that I've been talking about here. And so I know that when I took my first class in literary history in college, and I picked up on these three components of literary history I'm talking about, I was electrified. And I just loved being able to read this text here and make it talk to that text there, and read this text in the 20th century and find a context for the 19th century. In other words, it's just exhilarating. It's fun. And we will be attuned to the exhilaration and the fun. So I'm really looking forward to this course. I'll see you Thursday.